Back here on AFA Today, Steve Deace filling in for Kevin McCullough. You can hear me each weeknight on many of these fine AFR stations. Our show airs live 9 p.m. to midnight. And yes, even though I'm here for you, I will be doing that show as well because I'm that kind of guy. You want me on that wall, you need me on that wall. You can follow me on Twitter at Steve Deace Show. That's DEACE. Or you can email me, or ye. Steve at stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. I was just listening to Kirby Anderson's commentary on global warming. Over the years, I've interviewed several advocates for man-made climate change, global warming, or whatever they're calling it this week, when the previous term didn't focus group well. And I've asked them all the same question. I've asked them, are you a committed Darwinist? And if they say yes, then I ask them a simple follow-up. And that follow-up is, if you are a committed Darwinist and you are concerned about man-made global warming, are you not working against your own stated worldview? Well, what do you mean, they will say? Well, I will explain to them, your worldview says there is no specialness to humankind, that we all just randomly and purposelessly evolved here on this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan once described it. We are a microbe in the universe. We're a zit. There's no point to this thing called existence. We're not special. We weren't chosen or created as a people to bear an image of a creator. We just happened through natural selection to reach the top of the food chain through the struggle or for the survival of the fittest. So if the planet's changing climates because of human behavior, could that not just be natural selection at work? Could the planet just simply be saying, you know what, we've had enough of what human beings are doing to the planet. Time for salamanders to reign instead. It's time. It's the era. It's the epoch of the cockroach. The spotted owl will now rule, and we will go the way of the dodo bird or the dinosaurs. And to this day, every one of them has been flummoxed by that question. Just a thought. I think we don't ask the other side enough questions. We're too eager. Grab toothbrush, attack windmill. Sometimes just sit back. Jesus does this a lot. Well, why do you think that? Well, what do you think the greatest commandment is? Well, where do you think John the Baptist got his power to baptize from? Well, what do you think the Word of God says? Get the other side talking. And a lot of times, you'll find, as Ben Stein brilliantly does in his movie from a few years ago, Expelled, he just starts asking questions. And when the other side has to start really explaining where they're coming from, then it gets real stupid real quick. Now, back to this conversation we were having here before the break. Right now, only 17% of the American people currently believe the country is on the right track. 17. There has not been, I went back, I could only access the last 4 years of Rasmussen database polling on this right track, wrong track question. But I can tell you, in the last 4 years, since January 1, 2009, there has never been a majority of the American people that have believed we were on the right track. In fact, the highest we've been since January 1 of 2009 is 43%. Now, at this point, some of you may ask, well, that's great, Deace, but where was all this anger when 90% of incumbents were reelected last year in Congress and Obama was reelected as well? You know what? That's a good question, and I've got a good answer. There were only 2 states last year, Iowa and Louisiana, that had a higher percentage of eligible voters cast ballots in 2012 than 2008. 93 million eligible voters did not even vote in 2012. 93 million. Despite a record amount of media coverage leading up to the election, a record amount of campaign money spent on both sides, overall turnout in 2012 was lower than it was in 2008 and 2004. Furthermore, how about turnout in the Republican primary? The Republican primary cycle turnout as a whole in 2012 was lower than it was in 2008, which was the worst year for Republicans since the Watergate election of 74. How is that even possible? Especially when Republicans were coming off one of their biggest years ever in 2010. Yet there were fewer Republicans voting in the presidential primary cycle of 2012 than 2008. See, I think what's happening here, here's the explanation, I believe. I think what's happening here is the American people are dividing into 3 camps. Now, the first camp are the party loyalists on both sides. Now, that is a camp whose ground is shrinking underneath their feet as we speak, especially the younger you go. The younger you go, the less partisan they are. Now, the other 2 camps are growing, and they seem to be growing simultaneously. One camp, the dreaded low information voters, right? Or the ones who have made Jay Leno funny again. And then there's the drain the swamp camp. They want to go to Washington, D.C., burn this sucker down. Now, those in the drain the swamp camp seem to have decided, you can disagree, agree. I'm not making a case. I'm just giving analysis. You decide if you agree or disagree. But it appears those in that drain the swamp camp have decided that if nobody in either major party is really a threat to the status quo, they just don't care. What's the point? In their view, they think, who cares if one team of bureaucrats is in charge versus another team of bureaucrats? I want to tar and feather all bureaucrats. That's what they're thinking. They're looking for radicals. And right now, they do appear to be the side that's the most engaged of the three camps. I'll give you some evidence. How about the effort to defund Obamacare, which the ruling class said would never happen? The House did. Senators had the chance to, but they feared a government shutdown. So several of them, 76, including many Republicans, voted to fund Obamacare, and we have a shutdown nonetheless. Idiots. So a bunch of Republicans last week or 2 weeks ago went out there, voted to fund Obamacare, fearing a shutdown, but we still have a shutdown. So they got they got no credit and all the blame. How about the ruling class? We were going to war in Syria last month, remember? And the radicals said, no, we're not. We're not going to fight with Al-Qaeda in Syria. How about Ted Cruz's 21-hour quasi-filibuster, which, let's face it, was an anti-ruling class rant? That quintupled C-SPAN's ratings. Quintupled. When I read that, when I went to type it, it increased the ratings by 5 times. I had to spell check quintupled because I write for all kinds of national publications. I had never written the word quintupled before. I had to spell check it. C-SPAN's ratings increased 5 times during that Ted Cruz marathon. So if you've ever thought about running for public office as the anti-establishment candidate, really in either party, this next cycle for 2014, this would seem to be your year. This could be a cataclysmic tidal wave, provided, though, the right kinds of candidates are available to take advantage. Because the voters most likely to vote next year are itching for a fight. And they think D.C. is cruising for a bruising. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's a locomotive speeding full speed, going right at the ruling class, and they're the ones driving the train. So candidates that want to negotiate, candidates that want to compromise, candidates that want to show they are reasonable, they're not going to play in this environment. And again, that's not my opinion. I'm just looking at the numbers. That's the analysis. That's the reality of the situation. You can like that. You can not like that. I think really your opinion of it, frankly, is irrelevant. It is, as the great prophet Bill Belichick with the New England Patriots likes to say, it is what it is. That's the environment we're in. And it's really got the ruling class perplexed. And they really don't like that the radicals are taking a stand, because what it does is it frankly exposes a lot of the sniveling ruling class, deep baritone voices, as Cruz called them in his filibuster. You know, the Charles Krauthammers of the world, the George Wills of the world. It really exposes them as nothing more than Pied Pipers for the ruling class. Oh, it might be a right of center ruling class, but their motto is let them eat cake just the same. Increasingly, people are tired of candidates who want to nibble around the margins. If you want to run for office, let me just tell you, as a guy that, again, my job is to have my finger on the pulse of the electorate in the first in the nation caucus state and conservatives all over the country. If you're a Republican thinking of running for office, you're not going to out establishment Chris Christie. Yeah, Paul Ryan out there. God bless Paul Ryan, man. That guy's out there just trying to sell out everything he once believed. Doing his darndest. Begging the ruling class, please let me be your puppet for 2016. Let me be the next guy you get nominated to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Problem is, Paul Ryan, you got Chris Christie out there who's got all the same sellouts and a lot more charisma. So other than Christie, anybody other than Chris Christie, if you want to be the Republican nominee for president, here's my advice to you. To a man, go big or go home. Have a big idea that's going to get the establishment hacks masquerading as analysts on the Fox News All-Star panel tonight. That's going to get their panties all up in a bunch, wringing their hands that we just can't do that. Find out what's going to fire up the masses. Come up with some kind of plan. What's the plan? Somewhere, somehow, we're going to make somebody in Washington, D.C. hurt for what they've done to the rest of us. Somebody in Washington, D.C. is going to go without for just a little while, like the rest of us have been forced to. Something's going to get shut down. Something's going to get eliminated. What's your plan? I've seen a Scott Walker take on the public sector employee unions, which are frankly communists in many states. You saw him break the union in Wisconsin. That's what people want. Heads have to roll. Grab the jawbone of an ass. I just went King James version on you. Grab the jawbone of an ass, fashion a whip of cords, and start turning over tables, brother. That's what they're looking for. It's not about pragmatism versus principles. It's about survival. We're dying as a people here. This is unsustainable. It's laughable that the biggest argument today in Washington, D.C. is raising the debt ceiling, and we're $17 trillion in debt, not counting unfunded mandates, and most of that debt is money we owe in interest to our enemies, the Chinese. And when we go anywhere in this country and we go to a gas station to fuel up, we're paying our other enemies, the Islamists. This is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. Would the Alabama football program trust Auburn boosters to fund them? No. Of course not. But the brightest, most brilliant progressives in America, that's the master plan. Oh, and while we're at it, let's lay off a bunch of our own workers and then go to Washington, D.C. and lobby them for illegal aliens because we don't have Americans to work that we just laid off. Oh, and we've got to have more illegal aliens because we're in a demographic winter. But did anybody stop and think, that might be what happens when you kill 4,000 of your own people every day for 40 years? Anybody think that might happen? If you kill 4,000 of your own people every day for 40 years later, you might not have enough of your own people. People are looking for radicals, somebody that's going to challenge the status quo. Now, we have with us an individual who wants to be one of those champions next year. Matt Bevin joins us. He is challenging Ditch McConnell, the Senate Republican, quote-unquote, leader in the state of Kentucky Senate primary next year. We want to welcome him here to AFA today. Matt, Steve Deace, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thank you for having me on today.
So, Matt, give us your latest read of all the various talk about now we're going to go ahead and split up the continuing resolution in Obamacare. We're going to give them a short-term expansion of the debt ceiling, but we're going to go for defund Obamacare. We've got senators now wanting to go meet with Obama tomorrow. What's your read on what's really going on right now in Washington, D.C., Matt?
I think what we're seeing on both sides of the aisle is there is a tremendous lack of real leadership in either party. And at a time like this where true leadership is required, we are seeing in glaring contrast those who are willing to lead in the form of guys like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee against those who are the purported leaders. This latest iteration that came out at 6 this morning from Boehner about the extension, et cetera, is the first semblance of a blink that's coming out of the House, and it's unfortunate because this is a bit of a game of who has more spine, and sadly, it's two spineless sides trying to have this battle. I think it is imperative that the representation in Washington listen to we the people. And we the people are clearly stating that we do not need or want nor can we afford the implementation of Obamacare.
In just about a minute here, Matt, what do you have to say to the Republicans 2 weeks ago who voted to fund Obamacare by voting for cloture? And they did so out of a fear it would shut the government down, but yet we're sitting here in a shutdown anyway. So it seems like they made that vote for nothing, and now they get all the blame and none of the credit for doing the right thing.
Again, I think it was a sign of weakness. It's a worry about getting reelected. If we keep sending people to Washington, including those who voted for cloture, who are more worried about getting reelected or what the impact will be on the next election, more so than they are about doing the right thing, more so than they are about listening to the American people, then I think we will continue to have these types of problems. It's how we have gotten into this remarkable financial mess, because we have men and women who do not have the intestinal fortitude to do the right thing.
Matt, as we head to this break, when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit more about who Matt Bevin is, give this audience here with the American Family Association an idea of just who you are and what your worldview is and why you're doing what you're doing. Is there a website or anything though, during the break you can direct our audience to if they want to get more information on Matt Bevin?
Absolutely. They can go to mattbevin.com, mattbevin.com. I would encourage them to do so and be happy to join you again after the break here.
All right, so what propels a guy to leave a successful business practice and take on one of the reigning members of the American House of Lords in a bloody primary? Why would he do that? His name is Matt Bevin. He's doing it. He's taking on Ditch McConnell down in Kentucky. We'll find out what makes him tick next year on AFA Today.